to come to you again with a great offering in terms of this conversation in our month-themed children's books and children's literature in Africa. As you know, is my custom, I always start every episode with a quote from a powerful African woman and a quote that symbolizes or reminds me of our guest and the work that they do. So today's quote is from Wangari Maathai, and her quote says, "No matter who or where we are or what our capabilities, we are called to do the best we can." And when we start talking about the fabulous children's book our author has written, I hope you'll understand why I chose that quote. So welcome, Ruvimbo Marikano. She is our guest author for tonight, and she has recently released an amazing, interesting book series called Marwei Friends. Ruvimbo, welcome.
Thank you, Selena. Thanks for having me.
We are actually just very pleased to have you, especially I think more people will even be more intrigued once they find out the work that you do. So for those of us who are meeting Ruvimbo for the first time on this show, let me tell you a little bit about her. She was born in Zambia and later moved to Zimbabwe during her adolescent years. She studied industrial psychology with the University of South Africa and later attained a Master of Science degree in community psychology with Midlands University State College in Zimbabwe. She began writing her debut children's book after working with children who had experienced trauma, and most of these children were orphans and vulnerable children. If she's not teaching about preventing trauma in children, she's teaching how to parent children God's way. The pursuit for peace and quiet is important in her life. This is attained through travel to scenic destinations, but more so through prayer and the word of God. Ruvimbo currently lives with her husband, Ronald, in Harare, Zimbabwe. She has been blessed with 6 children. So, Ruvimbo, tell us a little bit about why a community psychologist would get into writing, because you're a science-led person, human being. Writing is very artistic. Why would you get into writing at all? How did you start writing?
How did I start writing? Well, you know, community psychology is about prevention of mental health issues. So, because I had that teaching that it's better to prevent than to treat. If we can stop the disease from coming in the first place, we'd better do that than treat it. So it got me thinking, so how do I communicate with children on how to prevent mental illness? And because I've always loved reading, I enjoy books. So I found that would probably be a good way to communicate with children rather than give them scientific literature to read. So it was, for me, I thought if I was that age, I would have wanted to learn about such a serious issue in a way that is palatable, in a way that I can relate to.
Definitely, I think making scientific ideas and concepts more palatable is something that we've all come to appreciate since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, because we had to learn something very new, but something that is something we would normally wait for an entire field of, experts to decode, to understand. But we were doing that simultaneously when we went through the COVID pandemic, especially during the period of the lockdowns. And what I found interesting is that some people really started to work on creating digestible types of information so that we could enter into science. So I think that what you've done there, or your purpose for writing, is actually really quite, I guess, avant-garde, very much forward thinking, and very much in the now, in the season we find ourselves as people. So tell us a little bit about the background to writing Marwei and children. Why that title, why that particular story, and what even inspired you?
Okay, so really my my initial idea was to write a book for adults, a book that would address issues of trauma, a book that would, you know, when we think about child abuse, we normally think about the girl child, so I had it. I I had this desire to just also bring out the pain that boys go through, pain that is not addressed, pain that is not really acknowledged. So I was writing that book, and then as I was writing, I thought, okay, if this child that I'm writing to had this childhood trauma done to them when they were a child, it would be nice if that child had something that could help them understand what they were going through. It would be nice if a child who's got a friend who's gone through such trauma had a book, had something that they could use to try and help their friend instead of helplessly, looking at a friend and actually being traumatized by the fact that, somebody else has gone through so much trauma and they can't help in any way. So that's how the book came about. So I realized that there was that gap where I hadn't seen any literature like that. I hadn't seen any book that would talk about something so serious, but in a way that young people can enjoy and relate to, and be able to talk about it, and at the same time, the book bringing awareness to communities, not and people, and having it as conversation. So that's what made me want to write, Marwei and Friends. And why the title? I really, Marwei, the name Marwei. Okay, so the first time I talked about Marwei, my husband told me that Marwei is the name for a woman who's not a woman who's not married, but who's going out with a married man. Okay, so I also didn't understand why I wanted why that name, But I also then thought, but everybody has been exposed to pain. Even that woman that we're talking about has been through some pain, and who knows why they find themselves in such a situation. So I picked that name. I was like, that's what I'm going with, because I felt like it was the right name. It was the right title for the book, and it's addressing pain that we don't know why things are happening in their lives like that, and so we mustn't judge. But let's listen to the pain that they've been through. Yeah.
Well, definitely listening to the pain, I think, is something quite profound. That many of the things we just take for granted in society, and often from a judgmental point of view, that there's a deeper story behind them, and that it's actually an invitation for us to listen rather than to judge by telling our own stories or coming up with our own conclusions about what must be going on in those situations. So that's a very, very interesting and a very interesting name. Definitely you did pick for the protagonist of the book. So
and from thinking like that, I then also realized that Marwei means, why are we fighting? Why the fight? So for me, it was like, a double, what do you call it? Like, double meaning. Like, why are we fighting children? Why are we putting them in a situation where they have to be fighting for life? Fighting to survive. So yes, so it's that, like, let's not judge people just by looking at their behaviors, or just because there's a stereotype about people, but at the same time, why are we creating an environment where children are being fought? Why are we fighting children's futures? Because trauma does derail children's futures. Yeah.
Well, certainly, I think one of the other things that's quite profound is that you're also seeking to deal with the issue at source. and create a tool for many different people within a child's system of well-being, would be necessary. So to be able to awaken a child's agency and advocacy for themselves, they obviously need friends. And in the Marwei Friends series, he has some really amazing special friends whom he takes on the journey with him. So that, I think, also expands our view of what is a hero, or what is somebody who is going to be a champion for children's rights look like, that they don't do it in isolation, but that relationships, and good relationships, even at a peer level, are important. And then there are other supportive relationships that you see glimpses of throughout the book. But in your series, the series has got 5 books. And in each book, you speak to a particular aspect or expression of trauma. So tell us a little bit about that in terms of what readers can expect when going through that series.
Okay. Yes, so there are 5 books in the book Marwei Friends, Fighting Trauma Busting Warriors. The first book is about domestic violence. Children that are exposed to domestic violence, they internalize that, and it affects them, and it can reflect as mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety. A lot of anxiety comes out of children that are raised in violent homes. And statistics will show you that in Zimbabwe, the violence against children is really high. Domestic violence is violence against children. In Zimbabwe, we have one of the highest rates of violence against children. So the first story, domestic violence, really looks at how a child perceives, that kind of relationship between their parents, and how it actually affects them, not only psychologically, but it affects them even academically. So domestic violence isn't just about parents fighting. It actually goes deeper and shapes a child's life. The second book is about grief. Grief, losing parents. If you look at the 2 years that we've been through, I know that our statistics, I think, are now at 5.4 thousand people that lost their lives to COVID. And you will see that a lot of those were parents. And so there's a child out there who's lost a parent. But our culture doesn't really recognize children's grieving, because children grieve differently. But guess what? Children also go through traumatic grief. They have complex grief, and this is this kind of trauma goes with them. If untreated, if unattended to, it can actually affect their lives. It can bring about depression, again, anxiety, even disorders, that can come out of that. So basically, that story is talking to kids that it's trying to normalize grief, and then address the issue of who will love me after my parents are gone, who's going to be there for me, and then what is it that I need to do to be able to come to terms with it. Another aspect of that story is looking at double orphans, children who have lost both father and mother. Who's going to take care of me, yes, our culture, our relatives take us in, but it's not automatic anymore, because there's now a financial implication to it, right? So you have children now we have child-headed homes. We have children in the streets. Those children have relatives, and so why are they not in a home where they're loved and protected and provided for? So that book really just teaches children to accept, to understand that there are different kinds of families, right? You have foster parents, you can have adoptive parents, And you can have kinship care, which is what I was talking about. Kinship care is what we know, but which is really disintegrating, and we need to promote that. We need to make both children and parents aware that this is a model for families that really worked for us as Africans.
Mm.
And that needs to be from even government needs to invest in promoting that kind of care model, because all the others, adoptive and fostering, really are not the best for children. They're like a substitute that is necessary to be there, but they're not the best. We want children to be in kinship care. So yes, so that's that book just talks about how the different care models and how they can all help to support children that have lost parents. Then
Yeah.
the third book talks about.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry. And I mean, grief is such a huge one, like you said, because of COVID. But also
Mm.
that we just need to also equip ourselves with new, healthier tools in terms of dealing with that
Mm.
for children in our families. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah, and yes, and children need grief therapy just like adults.
Mhm.
They need to talk about their grief. They need to speak about the people that they've lost, their loved ones, just as much as adults need that. Yeah. So the third book talks about child abuse, violence against children, um, and I think this is something that is
Mm.
globally, an issue, and so we talk about that, and basically teaching that book just teaches children what they can do in order to protect themselves, how they can raise an alarm if they're feeling unsafe, um, and yes, so basically that's we talking about sexual violence against children in that book.
Mm.
The fourth book talks about bullying. Um, when we grew up, bullying was nothing.
Mm.
People were bullied and people were laughed at. People were laughed at because of their skin or their, whatever is happening in their spaces. But research has shown that bullying is is a trauma that actually can affect a child even in their adulthood.
Mm.
And I'm sure you've come across people that will tell you that I've been bullied, and as a result, I've got social anxiety. I can't be around crowds. I don't feel comfortable, or
Mm.
I've got an issue about this aspect of my body because somebody body shamed me, or
Yeah.
whatever. You know, but it starts off with children, and we say, oh, children, children laugh at these things, but children can be taught not to do that.
Yeah.
Children can be taught better ways of playing and relating to people so that they are better citizens tomorrow,
Mm.
right? Yeah, and then the last book is on sickness.
Mm.
Um, yes, we in a country which is part of a region that was really, ravaged by HIV. So we have quite a few kids that have born HIV positive. But over and above that, cancers, we're having more and more children suffering from cancer. We have children that have mental health issues. We have children that have autistic. We have children that have ADHD, and all those kind of illnesses that affect children's self-esteem, self-worth, self-concept. So you want to be able to talk about that and give them handles as to how to communicate what they're feeling.
Mm.
Because they're sick, sometimes they are not able to express the
Yeah.
pain that they're going through. So you want to be able to um, give them the handles to be able to communicate. Yeah, so those are the 5 books that are in the series, Marwei and Friends.
Mm. So the other thing I wanted to actually ask is, I mean, that's a rich body of content dealing with, I think, some very key issues that do affect young children. But the book has recently gone into print. And what has been your sense of people's reception to the book?
I feel, not that I feel, I know that the children that have bought the book, I've asked them, and almost all of them that I've spoken deeper, they're able to hold a conversation on issues of trauma that is, sounds informed. Just the other day, I went to visit some children at a home that I usually go to, and I asked them about, okay, so which book spoke to you? Which book did you like? And I was kind of expecting them to talk about the book on grief, and then maybe have a conversation on adoption, and because I thought, because they're in that situation. But no, one of them talked about, sickness, how they're not able to talk about, they don't feel comfortable telling their caregiver that I'm not well. I found that very interesting. They even, like, they were talking about how one of them was not well that day, and nobody knew. She went to school, nobody knew, and they were like, if she had one of those cards that I Marwei Friends, she could have just raised it and would have all known, and should have stayed at home. I was so, I don't know, Selena, I felt like, wow, God, if it's just these kids that have got it, I've done my job. I really felt so, so fulfilled. I really felt like, yes, this is the kind of conversation that we want.
Okay, so you were telling us about the some of the impact that you've received from the book, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I was talking about.
It's okay.
Okay. Yes. So the little girl, the second child was the little girl that read the book on bullying, and I was amazed at how she really understood, how bullying impacts children.
Mm-hmm.
And she was telling me about how her friend did wits, okay, and how because she's also not a very confident. She felt that she wasn't a very confident child because she felt she looked different from other children.
Mm-hmm.
But you know how when you're young, you tend to have this perfect body that you're supposed to have, I suppose. But reading that book, she says, she then said to me, I now realize that I need to be nicer to my friend who bedwets, because I don't know why that happens to her.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's a conversation starter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right there. If ever that child feels comfortable enough to talk to her, she will have something to say. She will be able to refer her and tell her and normalize what she's going through, that there's nothing wrong with her per se, but she can get help, and it can get better. And then for herself as well, she was telling me that, I don't think, my body is not, and but at the end of the conversation, she was telling me that, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and I am who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most important thing, the most important thing is who I am, to God, and the things that that I can do, the things that I enjoy. And I was listening to this primary school child, and I was laughing. I was like, that's the sort of conversation that I wanted to hear children talking. But what amazed me the most, I must say, was one friend of mine who read the book,
Mm-hmm.
and she called me and she said, I've been triggered, And I was like, oh, okay, why? What happened? And then she says, I wish I had been given this book when I was younger. I wouldn't be the person maybe that I am, or I would have handled myself so much differently, you know, and she didn't tell it. I knew a bit of her background because I've known her, I've worked with her for a long time. But so those are sort of the responses that I'm getting from those that read, and then I get an opportunity to ask them that it's when I talk about my friend, that was like the most impactful for me. It was like, so this book is not, yes, it's for children, but even adults can benefit from it. And not only benefit themselves, but they can, there are sections in that book where you can start a conversation with your child. You know, there are questions that the child can answer to, that you can actually have a conversation and build up on the story to address the issues that you are having in your own home. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty powerful. I mean, that, because we always call it children's literature, but we don't realize that children bring so many other audiences with them. When you're talking about orphans and vulnerable children, they bring their caregivers, all of the people in their care network, from social workers, guardians to, all of the people they receive care with. But then also our own children in nuclear families or, traditional families also bring their parents and siblings with them and their other friends with them as well as do orphans and vulnerable children too. So it's very, very interesting that children tend to bring older audiences with them who also learn from the same subject matter. So it's quite a powerful medium. The other thing I wanted to actually ask is, you're a first-time writer. You also chose to self-publish the book. What was it like for you as an African female going through the publishing process and climbing that very steep hill? Because, you were a novice, both as a publisher, both as a writer. And in a children's book, you've also got quite a lot of visual considerations to make. And in terms of your illustrations, they're very striking and they're very, very modern and very well done. What was that process like for you?
I must say I was very blessed in that God brought people, connections that really helped a lot. Otherwise, yes, I would not have been able to do it. And one of them was you, Selina. You helped me a lot, to just put things in perspective and to, to be mindful of the important things, that make a book that's readable, right? The illustrations as well. My son looked at my first attempts and he was like, no. Let's do a research. Let's ask children. Let's compare pictures. Let's ask children. So that really helped. I had a few children that I sent the pictures to, and they picked the ones that are in the book. All of them picked the ones that are, except for one child. All of them picked the ones that were that are now in the book. In the process of the editing, just getting the story right, all that, just people that helps. It's very difficult, but it's doable if you get the right people surrounding you. Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine one of the reasons why it was particularly difficult for you is because you also published all 5 in one go. So you really accelerated and incubated your author process in a very intense process there by publishing so much all at once. But I think it's such a necessary topic, and it's so not topical, but it's so needed by so many that it was wise to put that out there. Finally, we're now coming sort of to the end of our interview and conversation. And sometimes we give our authors an opportunity to read a little passage from their book to sign us out of the interview. So I know that you have prepared something from the first book, and I'd like to give you this opportunity to close us out with your reading from your book.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to read from the first book. So suddenly a bright light shone in his room. Marwei, the sound of 1,000 waterfalls sounded in his ears. Marwei got up with lightning speed. What could that be? He could hear his heart beating very fast and strong. Marwei could taste his fear in his mouth. His tongue felt heavy and hot. Marwei, again the voice sounded, go to the door. The door opened and there stood a man as tall as a mopani tree in bright and shining purple clothes. The man shone like the stars. His eyes were a piercing gray color, his arms were strong, and he stood imposingly by the door. What kind of person is this? Marwei wondered. What does he want with a poor boy like me? Marwei, the shiny man said, God wants to have a chat with you. Come with me. He's waiting, Lord. He has sent me to fetch you, the strange man answered. With awe in his eyes and wonder in his heart, Marwei nodded with a swish and a swell and was taken up into the sky in a melodic voice. The strange tall man bellowed out his song. Jesu anoda vana vadoko, vana vose ndevake, vachena nevatema, vatsvuku ndevake. Jesu anoda vana vose.
Lovely. And I love the incorporation of vernacular languages in there. It's so powerful for helping children learn and understand. So thank you so much, Ruvimbo, for reading to us from your book and for sharing such an amazing taster of what people can expect, you know, from the 5 books. They're published all in together as one, as an omnibus. And so we will give you details in the comments about where you can get that book, and also Ruvimbo's social media handle so that you can connect with her directly. Thank you very much, Ruvimbo, for being with us this evening. And to the rest of you, our Tando Channel Book Club lovers, we'll see you same time next week with another fabulous African female author. Stay warm, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.